Hi, everyone. Welcome. We'll let folks join us in this space here, and we'll get started here in a couple of minutes. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us, Mayor Scott. We see you're here. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. All right. Well, hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Good morning to our friends on the West Coast. Good evening to our friends joining us today across the Atlantic. I'm Bill Nesper, Executive Director of the League of American Bicyclists, and it's my pleasure on behalf of the League's Board of Directors and staff to welcome you all to the 2022 National Bike Summit. This summit is not only going to be one of the largest summits ever, it is the first of its kind, offering in-person programming. We've been here since yesterday in Washington, D.C., and also in addition to this core content of plenaries, breakout sessions, and social events that are happening online once again this year. As I'm sure you've seen in our conference platform, Whova, we have an awesome lineup of speakers again, sessions, meetups, community conversations already started. I encourage you all to connect with your counterparts from around the country, both online and in person. We saw many conversations generated last year and sustained after these sessions in that conference platform. So make sure that you really get the most out of this online and now hybrid format. So yeah, let's do that again, and let's use Whova to really find those community generated events and create meetups and try to interact as much as possible with each other and also our sponsors and exhibitors. Thanks to the generous support of our sponsors, we have been able to keep the registration costs lower once again and make this as an accessible event as possible, offer as many scholarships as possible. Special thanks to our platinum sponsor, Lyft, and our gold sponsors, DoorDash, the Federal Highway Administration, and People for Bikes for their generous support of the summit this year. All of the sessions, including this one, are in Zoom. These sessions will be available on demand after the summit. We'll be posting those videos. We recommend that you use Zoom to view these sessions and the Q&A function in Zoom to ask your questions during live sessions. During the meetings and breakout sessions, use the chat function and Q&A. But in this particular one, use the Q&A to ask your questions. And closed captioning is available for all of our sessions, and we're really happy once again to have Stephen with us signing during all of the plenaries. Thanks to the wonders of meeting technology and a few years of practice, we can once again offer a summit experience that is engaging, informative, and hopefully fun. I thank our excellent staff once again for making this possible. They've been doing a great job and have really put together an awesome summit for you all, both online, in person. So today we're coming to you from Washington, D.C., which is the ancestral homelands of the Nacotchtank, the Anacostan, and the Piscataway peoples. We acknowledge the legacy of this land's indigenous elders, past, present, and future, and find inspiration from the lands and waters that they've been stewarding for thousands of years. We were going to be joined by a representative of, I don't know if Maria has joined us. I'll just take a quick look. Doesn't look like she was able to join us. We were going to have Maria Dadgar from the Piscataway tribe here, a member and also the executive director of the Intertribal Council of Arizona. I know she'll be joining us, but we just wanted to make that land acknowledgement and for all of you, and to recognize that we've all been inspired by the incredible work that's being done by Indigenous leaders within our movement, like last year's Educators of the Year, Iris Coronado and Victoria Cupis, who are the co-founders of the Indigenous Road Warriors in Arizona. We encourage all of our partners to continue to make connections with Indigenous leaders in your areas and build stronger communities and a more inclusive biking movement together. So thank you all for investing your time here at this bike summit to share best practices, to listen, to learn, to represent your neighborhoods, your communities and states in these sessions and on Capitol Hill. As a movement, our success has come and our better future will be because of our work together. We together believe deeply that everyone should have access to biking safely and comfortably, and access through biking to the places that they want to go. We believe that everyone should have the opportunity to bike for transportation, for good health, for the pure joy and freedom that it brings, no matter their income level, their neighborhood, their race, their age, their ability. We've said it before and we'll just keep saying it. The bicycle is the best vehicle ever invented. Bicycling is part of the solution to many of the challenges that we face in our communities, our country, and world. And the bicycle is our vehicle for change. It is our vehicle for choosing a better future. And that is the theme of this year's summit, choosing our future. So I'm going to just say a few words from the league, and then I'm going to hand it off to some excellent speakers here in a couple of minutes. But I just want to recognize, where we are right now. Over the last 100 years, our communities and transportation system have been developed and designed primarily for automobiles, which has prioritized speed over people's safety and ability to get around without a car. In communities across the country, people who bike have been treated as if they don't belong on our streets. The bicycle is often viewed as a toy, and bicycling as a niche activity for select groups rather than how bicycles should be seen, which is an essential tool in building a better life for everyone. We think bicycling should be commonplace, an everyday part of life. So removing barriers to bicycling must be a national priority. And so we have big choices in front of us. We together at national bike summits and throughout the years have been successful in securing increased funding and better policies at the federal level that can make our streets safer and more welcoming for biking. We can connect our bike networks and support comprehensive biking education, and we can improve access to biking, especially in the most underserved and disconnected communities. But it's going to take us shifting up and shifting our efforts to demand that these policies are adopted at all levels and that funds are spent the right way, so that we do not further exacerbate our problems. We shouldn't be surprised if many a state DOT, metropolitan planning organization, or local agency will be on autopilot with well-worn methods of spending, which has gotten us into the mess that we're in by subsidizing sprawl and overbuilt highways and arterial roads that prioritize speed and disconnect our communities. But building ever more barriers to common sense, connected networks for bicycling, walking, and active transportation. Yet, there are leaders who get it. We know this kind of, and you're going to hear from them. This kind of development they know that this kind of development doesn't give the return on investment that we deserve in our communities. There are leaders working with us to build top-tier bicycle-friendly communities that lead the lists of the best places to live, to work, to visit, study, retire, because they've shifted their efforts to making bicycling better and safer. Even AAA knows that the cost of traffic violence on our roads is 3 times the cost of congestion. But too many agencies and policymakers act as if this isn't so. And so we have states like Wisconsin, home of Madison, one of the only a handful of platinum bicycle-friendly communities, and several other highly ranked bicycle-friendly communities. We have Wisconsin spending over $1 billion on one suburban highway interchange, more than 5 times what they spent on biking and walking in the last 2 decades. These are the mindsets and the inertia we must overcome. And when I look out at the summit and I see all of you in the state of the bicycling movement, I know that we have the people to create the momentum to choose a different future. We have a great team of change makers at the summit. Just look at the people, businesses, organizations gathered here. Look at the ever-growing list of policymakers and leaders that get it throughout the country. We're making progress, and we should be proud of that. But if we're going to take this to the next level and see a safe system approach to transportation investments, to slow the cars down, to create the streets that we need, and the comprehensive, legible bike networks that welcome all, we have to bring more people on board, because the bicycle is such a powerful tool. If we're going to build a better life for everyone through bicycling, we must ensure that our movement is representative of everyone. We have to meet people where they are, and we have to keep it simple. This isn't rocket science. We're not looking to go to Mars. And while we applaud the development of electric cars and automated vehicles, an electrified transportation system, a renewable electrified transportation system, the world needs biking today. We're an essential part of the solution right now, for addressing climate change, for living healthier lives, and for a more connected and equitable communities. People need to be able to act at the street level and the community level, not just because biking is great, we know it is, but because of what bicycle friendly means for improving lives and communities. That inspires people to join. The sessions at the summit provide tools and examples to inspire change in our communities and to build the political will to get decision makers from here in Washington into your city councils to act. We have hundreds of bike advocates here in person and online, networking, learning, and offering important lessons to take to your meetings on lobby day and also to your next city council meeting. At this summit, we've set up tracks in key focus areas about making bicycling better for all. You'll learn about the best implementation strategies and getting the best possible implementation of the new transportation bill in order to build a safe system and a safe system approach and build those great biking networks and the infrastructure that meets the needs of people of all ages and abilities and connects every neighborhood and leaves no one behind. You should be learning about the new approaches to bicycling education. We believe everybody, you will be learning, and you should be, we believe that everybody should have access to the skills and confidence building that bicycling education. And we think that by high school, every young person in this country should receive on-bike bicycling education. And we can't increase bicycling through bike infrastructure and education alone. We have to build partnerships. So at this summit, you'll be learning about how to build more effective partnerships and increasing real engagement with people and building stronger relationships so that we can have stronger bicycle-friendly communities and a stronger country. The bike community must do more than just being open to all. We have to invest in welcoming all in order to build great biking cultures. We'll learn about using the League's bicycle-friendly programs throughout the program to help us accomplish that. And across all these tracks, we must embed the principles of equity, diversity, and inclusion from the outset all the way to the measurement of outcomes. Are people at the center of our work? Do these programs reach and authentically include people from all backgrounds? Is this project removing barriers for people of color and other groups who have been marginalized? Those are the questions we have to ask ourselves. This summit has always been a place to connect and reconnect, to regroup and be re-energized, and be reminded that we're working together for a better future with some really amazing people doing incredible work at this moment of enormous opportunity. So thanks again for being here. And it's because of this critical moment that we're in that we're thrilled to have two leaders coming from the local and state levels to speak in this plenary on promoting safety and equity through state and local policy. We're thankful to have Danielle Arigoni, who is a League of American Bicyclists board member and the director of Livable Communities at AARP, where she leads AARP's federal, state, and local advocacy efforts, including through AARP's state offices relating to housing, transportation, and public spaces. Danielle is an urban planning by education and has more than 20 years of professional experience contributing to more sustainable and resilient federal, state, and local policy, including prior leadership both at the US EPA and HUD. So over to you, Danielle. Thanks for being here.
Bill, thank you so much. I am really pleased to be here today, not only because I love the Bike Summit every year, but especially this year feels like a critically important moment in time for us all to come together. It really represents a unique opportunity, I think, as you'll hear time and time again throughout the sessions, that we have this moment in time to really work in significant and important ways to improve mobility for people of all ages, of all abilities, and through a range of modes, particularly biking and walking. With the backdrop of the transformational changes that are made possible in the bipartisan infrastructure law, it becomes more important than ever to ensure that all levels of government are poised to affect change. We all live in a community where there's a mayor, a city councilor, or a city manager, or maybe one of all of those that holds the key to real local change. And we all live in a state or territory where local action is significantly impacted by actions taken by the state government level. So for those reasons, I think we are really very fortunate today to be able to hear from two of the most significant and important leaders out there in this space right now. First, we'll hear from Mayor Frank Scott, who I'm really happy to invite to the virtual dais here, if you would join me, please. Mayor Frank Scott made history on December 4th, 2018, when he was elected as the City of Little Rock's 73rd mayor and the first popularly elected African-American chief executive. Since that day, Mayor Scott has worked to unite the city's diverse neighborhoods into one city and one people. Mayor Scott brings extensive public and private sector experience to the job, including prior experience working as a policy director for Arkansas Governor Mike Beebe, as a community banker with First Security Bank, and as a board member of the Port of Little Rock Board of Directors and member of the Arkansas Highway Commission, all of which give him a deep understanding of the critical role of infrastructure in supporting community growth and well-being. Mayor Scott is also an associate pastor and a youth mentor and a proud child of Little Rock himself. Mayor Scott, welcome.
Thank you so much. It is indeed a pleasure to be with everyone here today. I first want to take time to recognize my team from our Little Rock Parks and Recreation Department, John Lewandowski, who is a great mobility leader here in the city of Little Rock. And as I talk about this team in this day and age here at the National Bike Summit, I want to kind of bring a bit of a context on where we are here in the city of Little Rock, Arkansas state capital city, Arkansas's largest, most populous, most diverse city. And so when I think about these things, I grew up in Southwest Little Rock, and I know and love our city. For those who aren't aware, Southwest Little Rock is one of our more impoverished areas of the city of Little Rock. And knowing this city, but being blessed to travel many days from Southwest Little Rock to West Little Rock for work, knowing the disparities and the diversity and the changes that were going on in our city, we know that it was time for change. And so when we decided to run for election in 2018, a host of reasons we focused on how do we unite, how do we grow, and how do we transform our city. And one of the key factors of transforming our city is understanding, with me being a millennial mayor, is the understanding of mobility. And so we included mobility as a key policy platform within the city of Little Rock because we want to project the future. And projecting the future is to understand the ability to have unity, the ability to grow as a city and to transform as a city to ensure that you have inclusion with all. And what better way to focus on inclusion with any city is by focusing on how our brothers and sisters of residents can accurately, equitably, and with sustainability utilize mobility. And so that's what we've been able to do. But I also want to share that, Little Rock has not always been on the cutting edge. Many times leaders want to share all the great things about their city. And I believe you, I got a lot to share about how great Little Rock is. But you also have to understand where you come from. And as it relates to mobility, it was a period in time that we needed a lot of help. And that was the reason why we wanted to include mobility as part of our platform. And so when you set the stage of Little Rock, you understand from the Trail of Tears to the Little Rock 9 to the Clinton Presidential Center, we are stewards of American history, both tragic and inspiring. And as I always share with people, Little Rock represents the pain and promise of Arkansas. And as we are focused on the promise of Arkansas, we're focusing on how do we create intentional relationships, build intentional trust, so we can execute or do the will of the people. And mobility plays a vital role in that intentionality because we're able to connect ourselves with one another through how do we operate and how do we move around our city in a sustainable fashion. And so that's the reason why we are leaning in on quality and life and place enhancements and amenities within the city of Little Rock. One of the things that I want to share, any city, small, medium size, or large, as we're pushing out of this pandemic, we have to lean in on quality and life and place. And a part of quality and life and place is by focusing on mobility, ensuring that we have bike-friendly assets within our cities, ensuring not only do we have bike-friendly assets, that we have dynamic trails and we have dynamic park systems, because what we understand, when you want to create intentional relationships, build intentional trust, and to execute and to truly bring a people together, many times it happens over sports, entertainment, and food. But you got to get to all of those locations, and you have to do it in a safe manner. And many times when we saw different things going on in our city, we understood that we had to better implement our complete streets ordinance. Not only implement the complete street ordinance and have a mobility platform, but also have a set of leaders, which we have and with our Transportation Advocacy Committee, that are truly working each and every day to lead me and my team to ensure that we have a mobility friendly city and ensure that we get rid of the notion that we have to not have walkways and sidewalks, but also understand from a safety standpoint, what was happening here in Little Rock, not only did we not have the adequate infrastructure and the master planning, which we all are building the foundation and really moving forward in a real way right now, is then two, what did it do to our pedestrians when you don't have a pedestrian friendly infrastructure? And so when you see that how many people where lives have been lost or injuries that have been impacted, how do we change that concept through policy? And so many times I'm a big believer that we have to move from platitudes and policy to true action. And so that's what we've been about since we were elected and coming into office in 2019. And that's how it focuses on how we unite, how we grow, and how we transform. But from a state, local standpoint, we have been blessed to not only better implement our complete streets ordinance, not only to focus on having a true mobility policy platform, not only to figure out how do we increase the existing canvas of what we have as a city, a very diverse city in geography of 124 square miles, and how do we better utilize the greenery of our city? How do we better understand the need to ensure not only do we have bike-friendly areas, bike-friendly assets, but also how do we have more vibrant passive parks? And when you focus on that, we understand that you have to be well-resourced. And then many times, not only being well-resourced, how do we connect the dots? How do we connect our city to ensure that we're building those relationships, that we're building trust with one another, that we are leaning in on quality of life in place? You then have to work with our federal government. I'm so grateful for the relationship that we've had with the Biden administration and U.S. Department of Transportation under the leadership of Secretary Pete Buttigieg, as well as now the new transportation czar and former Mayor Mitch Landrieu. There's so many diverse mobility platforms and opportunities to receive funding from the new bipartisan infrastructure deal, which we gladly supported and grateful that it was able to get passed. And so how we have to all bring more people, more residents to the table to ensure that we are connecting, that we're building, and that we're inspiring and aspiring all together on how we want to see our city move forward. But you have to be well-resourced. So it takes the bipartisan infrastructure bill to fund. And so we're happy that there are the transportation alternative planning programs that we have been able to leverage. Most recently, we're now connecting within Little Rock south of 630 east and north of 630 together through the Tri Creek Greenway, where we've been able to raise close to $1 million in federal funds. And so we have to ensure that we have to be advocates for our cyclists as we continue to move forward. So I encourage everyone to please implore our members of Congress on just how important mobility is to our respective cities and our respective states. And so moving from understanding the why for our people, understanding the why, what it means to get the job done, to aspire for a particular city, and understand that you have to be resourced. But at the end of the day, after you have that inspiration and you have those resources, you have to execute. And so we're so happy that we're working on, when there's opportunities, big and small, to implement more bike-friendly pathways within our city, to figure out how do we connect more of our parks together, how do we create more trails that are dual trails, to create this dynamic system and a coordinated system within our city. But also, what are we doing too to ensure that we're focused on our brothers and sisters that are with disabilities and still create that array of mobility, whether you're a pedestrian or not, but the ability to truly connect, to transition and coordinate throughout one city as we continue to move forward. And so these are some of the things that, from a mayor's perspective, that it's great to have a team, a Parks and Recreation team that's living, breathing mobility, to bring new ideas, to ensure to figure out how do we resource those ideas and how do we bring them to fruition, because it takes one park, one bicycle path, one bicycle asset at a time to create a culture. And then once we create the culture, we create a community. And once we create the community, we're able to ensure that we replicate ourselves in each area of our city to ensure that it's true coordination within the city. And so it is indeed a pleasure to be with you today to give a mayoral perspective on the why for this particular time as we're focused on the National Bike Summit. And so those who are here today continue to focus on how do we help our existing elected officials understand the reason for the culture, the reason for the community, the reason for the communication of it, and the coordination. and the advocacy to get more resources so we can all execute together. So thank you so much on behalf of the City of Little Rock.
Mayor Scott, thank you so much for your remarks and for all the good work that you continue to do for your city and really acting as a leader for your brethren across the country of what mayors can be and how they can behave. Let me ask you a couple of questions. I know there's a couple trickling in through the Q&A, but in looking back at some of the things you're reconciling with in Little Rock, I think there's lessons to be learned and extracted for other communities as well. One of which is pitting the sort of allure of big investments in interstates against what you just described as sort of the smaller scale investments in bike trails where you're building out one path at a time. I know that in the past you've supported in Little Rock there the Interstate 30 investments, and that at times that has sort of challenged you to explain how both of these things coexist together. Support, and given your role as a board for the highway administration previously, how do you explain to skeptics, or how would you explain to advocates how best to position investments in bike and ped infrastructure when they have to battle against, I think, the tendencies of some DOTs to default to the big infrastructure investments of the type that is illustrated in Little Rock with the Interstate 30?
Sure, and I think it's good for context as being a former highway commissioner during the initial decisions of Interstate 30 expansion. I was a highway commissioner then before I was elected as mayor, and then also being on the other side of the table now as mayor. One of the things as a highway commissioner from the years of 2013 to 2017 and representing the city of Little Rock was to ensure that many times it's not an either or, it's a both and. And Little Rock is very complex because we are a mid-sized city. In the grand scheme of things, we're now 203,000 people here in the state of Arkansas, but we're the largest city. We are the healthcare epicenter. We are the financial epicenter. We are the workforce and economic center of the state, as well as being the state capital, being one of 50 unique cities. And so, in any given point in time, when our population is 203,000, we are a population in our city proper close to 400,000 between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. And so we understand that we cannot change the world overnight, but you also have the same realities on how do we change cultures. And so we have to be very strategic in our mindset on how do we push forward with true mobility, which is an array of opportunities to travel and traverse through a city. And how do we promote from a bike standpoint? How do we promote from having greater focus on sustainability, and how do we reduce greenhouse emissions and things of that nature by providing more coordination even within our transit system. And so it's having multiple opportunities to traverse the city. And whereas from a state perspective, you're looking at the whole entire state concept. And so as a highway commissioner, being a Little Rock resident, knowing the impact it will have, we made sure that there were ways to create more mobility with the interstate expansion by creating bus rapid transit and creating particular bike lanes that go alongside the interstate. And I can tell you, if I was not the highway commissioner, that may not have happened. But being a millennial and understanding that mobility from that standpoint. So that's from the highway commission standpoint. But now as mayor, is to understand that how do we react and understand that we as mayors, we as city council members have to understand we have to master plan our cities. And the reason why the interstate expansion even happened in the first place, because the city did not control the right of way from 50 years ago. And so we don't appropriately master plan our cities to ensure that our cities are growing the way we want them to grow. We have to be very intentional. And so, but you have to be very intentional from the smallest of decisions to the biggest of them.
I think that's a really important point. I think, I know you've been really consistent in your sort of, yes, and we need all of the solutions. You can't just favor one versus another. We have to have all of these tools available to communities to really achieve the goals that you've described in terms of mobility, equity, and sustainability. One of the questions that came in speaks to sort of how do you, despite years of planning in some cases where there have been commitments to bike infrastructure by local leaders, how can we advocates get local leaders to really be accountable for those decisions? We've heard time and time again in some communities, yes, we commit to this future, but what is it that we could do to hold local leaders' feet to the fire so that they really can capitalize on this moment of all these important decisions that need to be made about how to invest these infrastructure dollars to really significantly and in a very tangible way advance plans that have been put in place already?
I think it's really what I kind of call it 3 Ps in that situation: be proactive, have a purpose, and be present. So one, be proactive. Let's not wait until decisions have already been made to get in the game, to be present. And then while you're present, please have a purpose to share. We as elected officials, we want to be responsive to our customers, which are the residents of our city. And so the best way to hold us accountable is by being present, so we know and have the ability to listen, by being proactive, coming to us early to share concerns and to advocate, but being present to understand, to know that you all are listening to us and we're listening to you. And the best way to hold us accountable is to vote. And so, and I want to ensure, and I think it's imperative for the attendees today, is to ensure that you're going to the city council meetings, that you are signing up to speak, that you're sharing the why, to ensure that everyone knows it, because in many times, a mayor has administrative and executive authority to get the things done, but when it comes to the policy, why he or she are forwarding the policy, it still takes the vote of a city council to still move it forward. So it needs to be more than just the mayor. And so that's the reason why you have this summit, because you have to speak to all constituencies from an advocacy standpoint. So I would give those 3 Ps. And then 2, support those that are focused on quality and life in place. Unfortunately, I'm one of those go big or go home kind of elected officials. And so we pursued in the middle of a pandemic a penny sales tax that was going to be basically raise about $500 million over the next 10 years to solely focus on quality and life in place. It failed, but we're going to keep, when I go to the bat, we swing for the fences. And so we're going to keep swinging. And it takes bike advocates who are focused on that culture, that focus on that community, really want to see a fight. And that you have to support the initiatives and get out and vote, not only on, the traditional election day, but as well as the special election days as well.
That's great. We're just about out of time, but I also know that tonight is your 3rd State of the City address, if I'm not mistaken. Do you want to share any previews with us? 4th, my apologies. Do you give us any sneak peeks about what you'll be mentioning or announcing there in terms of bike and ped infrastructure?
Well, because I know there may be a few folks from Little Rock, I don't want to give too much of a sneak peek, but what I will say is we are casting a very bold vision, and we want to continue the great work in the foundation that our Parks and Recs team, as well as our very committed residents, on how do we continue to have more bike-friendly assets? How do we create a more bike-friendly culture? How do we become more coordinated? How do we fund more programs to get more people? Because I'll be quite honest, we have to diversify those that are on bikes. And so we're trying to figure out how do we have more people of color that are utilizing bikes and the mobility from that standpoint. So you'll hear more about that then.
That's great. We'll circle back and listen to your comments afterwards. Thank you so much, Mayor. It's really been a pleasure to have you with us. We appreciate your leadership, your hard work, your dedication, and for the time today. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, let's move on up a level on the governmental hierarchy, if you will, here, and let's hear from the state level, because again, we all know that what mayors are able to do, such as Mayor Scott, what he's able to do in Little Rock is very much driven by what is possible in the state government structure. So I'm really pleased to be able to invite Roger Millar to the table now, the virtual dais rather. Roger Millar was appointed the Secretary of the Washington State Department of Transportation by Governor Jay Inslee in August 2016. The prominent theme that has run throughout Roger's 40-year career has been implementing transportation systems that are not ends unto themselves. Rather, they are the means towards economic vitality, environmental stewardship, social equity, public health, and aesthetic quality. His work on the Portland streetcar and the Glenwood Springs to Aspen BRT provided communities nationwide with new modal tools. And his Complete Streets leadership has created a national movement that many of us enjoy and benefit from for transportations that are safe, convenient, and pleasant for all users, regardless of how they choose to travel. His state DOT leadership, which you'll hear more about momentarily, is bringing innovation to agencies with enormous influence on transportation investments. So we'll have a lot to learn from Secretary Millar. So with that, let me turn it over to you. Welcome.
Great, thank you. It was great to hear from the mayor. The last time I was in Little Rock, I was working on the team that developed the River Cities Travel Center, and I loved my visits to that wonderful town. I'm going to share my screen now because what panel would be complete without a PowerPoint presentation, and talk to you a little bit about what we're doing in Washington State. And I'll make sure I can actually advance the slides. That's always a positive thing. There they are. Okay, talk about our strategic plan, our plan for resilient transportation systems, and the response. So our strategic plan has three elements. It has workforce development, inclusion, and practical solutions. When we talk about all the things we do, we can't do it without good people and people who understand and are culturally competent. So we focus on safety. We're focusing right now on a generational transition. A significant portion of our workforce is retiring, and we're hiring in a very tough labor market. So if you want to do great things, check out our website and see what kind of jobs are open. We need from our legislature competitive wages. We need revenues for an enhanced recruiting program and an enhanced training program, and slowly but surely we're getting those. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is the second pillar of our strategic plan. We are working very hard to be a culturally competent agency. We want a workforce that looks like the people we work for. We want to contract with anyone who is able and willing to work with us, regardless of who owns the business. And we're working hard in the construction workforce development space. All of our contracts require a minimum of 15% of apprentice hours on them. And through our pre-apprenticeship support services program and our work with our labor unions, with community groups, with community colleges and the like, I'm proud to say that 45% of the apprentices working on our construction projects are women and people of color. We are on an equity journey. We have a long way to go, but we've made some great progress recently. I took the lead on developing resolutions of intent at the Western Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials. We unanimously passed a resolution on systemic racism. And then at AASHTO, the American Association, of which I'm currently the vice president, we passed a resolution on justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, where the state DOTs acknowledged their role in the past and acknowledged that there are impacts to communities that exist to this day because of the actions of state DOTs. And we commit to basically fulfilling our responsibility under the law, but we did it in a way that it was really, really heartening as the board voted on that resolution to hear those aye votes coming in from South Carolina and Georgia and from Washington State. So for us as an agency, we've taken those national and regional statements of intent. And last summer, I signed an executive order, an anti-racism executive order for the agency that, among other things, required us to conduct an equity baseline study. And we worked with Western Washington University on that. And we're currently in the process of developing an equity plan, again, to work towards that cultural competence. And then the last of our three pillars is practical solutions, which is to avoid jumping to costly expansion projects as the solution of the problem, rather work to identify the right investment at the right place and the right time. We've done an awful lot. We are a safe systems agency. We are very involved in transportation system management, transportation demand management. We're very involved in partnering with our MPOs and our regional transportation planning organizations. And we continue to embed that into our business practices, but that's kind of inside baseball. So we're changing our strategic plan. We're in the middle of that and moving to resilience and the need for a resilient transportation system. Resilient in the face of climate change, resilient in the face of disasters, natural and man-made, that aren't directly tied to climate change, resilient in the face of demographic change in our communities, and resilient in response to the ups and downs of our very, very trade centric economy in Washington State. So as we provide a resilient response, We need to start with safety and state of good repair. We need to invest to replace these trends. Travel went down, fatalities went up. That's not a good thing. In the pedestrian and bicycle space in Washington State in particular, we've got a long ways to go. And the legislature, with the recent Move Ahead Washington package, gave us direction and gave us resources to begin to reverse that trend. We also have a transportation system that we've invested heavily in over the last 75, 80, 100 years. Washington State system is worth about $200 billion, and we do not invest in preserving it. And you can see from the numbers here, when you don't invest, stuff falls apart. So that's our first message. We, as again, own about $200 billion worth of stuff. We should be spending $2 billion a year on it. We're spending less than $1 billion. And that is a recipe. We call it the glide path to failure. And one of the things that I spend a lot of time on, and you're asking, how do you convince elected officials to pivot? We, as an agency, have an annual budget of a little over $4 billion. And a lot of that budget over time has been directed at addressing congestion, because every time you turn around, there's a think tank, a consultant, somebody, university, whatever, publishing a report on the cost of congestion to the economy. And the cost of congestion in the Washington State's economy last year was about $2 billion. But the cost of state of good repair was twice that, at almost $4 billion. But the cost of the crashes, including the pedestrian and bicycle crashes in Washington State last year, was $14 billion, way more than what congestion did. And that's money that comes out of the budgets of Washington families and Washington small businesses. And then you've got the impact, of course, of climate change. Washingtonians pay a gas tax, but if we were to raise 14, and it's a pretty high gas tax, if we were to raise a gas tax to raise $14 billion a year, we'd have a $4.73 a gallon gas tax. And the reality is that is a hidden tax that Washington businesses and Washington families pay because we're not investing enough in safety. Other things we need to do in a resilient response: decarbonize everything. And I'm sure you hear a lot about that. The great thing about walking and biking is we're done. We need to finish what we've started. There are projects out there well under development, including our fish passage program. That's almost $4 billion that we're spending to open Washington's waterways up for salmon. We also need to get more out of what we've already built through system and demand management. I talk often and loudly about linking land use and transportation. We need affordable housing and transportation choices that are integrated. Building affordable housing on the periphery of the community and requiring everybody to drive in because they don't have any choice is not good policy. We need to link them together. We need to make it safe and easy to shift short trips to walking and biking. We need to take advantage of everybody suddenly discovering that, hey, I can do my job from home some of the time, some of us. And we need to invest in technology, but invest in the technology in a way that harnesses that technology for the communities we want, as opposed to putting technology's harness on. So when I was first appointed secretary by the governor, I got an email from a constituent congratulating the new job. Your speed limit signs say 60 miles an hour. I've never been able to drive 60 miles an hour on I-5. Your agency is a failure. It's great. Thanks. Good to hear that. But I asked the team, what would it cost so that everybody who lives in Washington today could drive 60 miles an hour anytime they want? $115 billion, or about a $2.50 a gallon gas tax. Now, we don't have the political will for a $2.57 gallon gas tax. We also recognize that also just addresses the people who live here today. It doesn't address other state routes and local roads that would need to be enhanced to, accommodate all that traffic. It doesn't. It is financially impossible to do. It is politically impossible to do. There is no airshed. There is no watershed that would accept that kind of investment. We've gotten to a point of diminishing returns in highway investment where we're spending more and more and getting less and less. And it's time to pivot away and do something different. So I'm all for system expansion. I want to expand our system. I want to expand our active transportation system, which is why we developed and have adopted a active transportation plan for the state. I want to expand our public transportation system. I want to invest in ultra high-speed ground transportation in the Cascadia Innovation Corridor between Portland and Vancouver. I want to invest in aeronautics, and I want to invest in freight access. But there's an awful lot that can be achieved in those first two, active transportation and public transportation. And all these investments create jobs. That's not primarily why we do it, but it creates jobs. And I point out every time I can that $1 invested in a bicycle project or a pedestrian project generates 46% more jobs per dollar than car-only road projects. The public transportation projects generate 31% more jobs per dollar, and that preservation work generates 16% more jobs per dollar than that famous big mega project. So we're rethinking our old models. We're working with our partners. We're re-examining how we use our infrastructure. We're looking at equitability, inclusivity. We're exploring the changes to the modern work environment. We're emphasizing resilience and adaptability. And we had the opportunity recently, the legislature passed and the governor signed a historic funding bill called Move Ahead Washington. $4 billion in transit and active transportation projects out of a total project of $17 billion, quadrupling the historic spend. This bill has more money for transit and active transportation than for new highways for the first time ever. Kids under 18 and under will ride for free on public transportation in Washington, including Washington State ferries and Amtrak Cascades. We have an environmental justice oversight imposed. We have a Connecting Communities grant program. We're investing in tribal transit. Every project that Washington State DOT does over $500,000, which is darn near all of them, will be required to incorporate complete streets principles into the design and development of that. And what I'm hoping to use that money to do is to implement our active transportation plans and the active transportation plans of communities. We're not going to put a sidewalk and a bike path on every project we do, but if, as we reach out to our community and we find that there's a gap in the network that's in their identified plan, we're going to build it as a part of the project, including our paving work. So we're investing $150 million in the start of the high-speed rail project. I'm really excited about that. $293 million in other public transportation projects, $302 million in projects that improve the safety of people walking, biking, and rolling. That is the project-specific kind of the legislatively directed investment on top of the programmatic advances. So I'm really excited about it. It's a good time to be Secretary in Washington State, and I will stop talking at you and see if I can answer some questions.
Well, thank you so much, Secretary Millar. I think I can speak for everyone by saying, can we clone you? And can we just create like 49 replicas of you in every state DOT? I think we'd be looking at a very different transportation network if we could. There's been several shout outs that I could mention, but in the interest of time, I think I'll just say that you've got fans who appreciate your work to pair the Glenwood Springs Aspen BRT line with bike sharing. That's been a real note of success. And then good kudos here from the Bike Safe program, who's been very appreciative of your work to integrate equity and traffic safety. There's so many slides that you showed, I think that sparked a lot of conversation and question, at least in my brain, and I think among others too. One of which was the slide that showed the cost of safety as a comparison for cost of congestion, cost of resilience. That's a really powerful tool, obviously. I'm sure you've used it to great effect so far, and you will continue to do so. And I think that is the kind of tool that can be replicated by our advocates all across the country, many of whom are tuned in today. Can you break down a little bit more what went into that calculation of the state's safety and crash costs? Because I think that being able to counter position that against cost of congestion, cost of climate, cost of other sort of challenges that we are confronted with can be a very persuasive point. So what goes into that cost?
Yeah, it is persuasive. You know, when we talk about safety, we talk about frequently of the number of lives lost, the number of serious injuries, and the like. And those are tragedies for the families, the friends, the coworkers, the communities that those people are in. But everybody in Washington State, if they know one thing at the very bottom of their heart, deep down inside, what they know is that they're a good driver and the crash is never going to happen to them. But they're always stuck in traffic. So what we did is we took those individual tragedies and summed up the actuarial cost of it to say, this is what it costs the economy. If you look at that slide, and I'm sure the league will share the slideshows, but if you go to WashDOT's website and look at about WashDOT and the secretary, there's a place down there called State of Transportation. All those slides are there. And the slide, that graph, the how-to is down at the bottom. So the specifics of it, but it's the lost opportunity for there's a way to calculate that. The insurance companies do, and we've done that as well. People ask me to put public health on that graph. I don't know how to do that just yet. So, but if somebody's got it, let me know.
Well, maybe next time you come back to us, you'll have you'll be able to teach us about how to do that as well. But thank you for that. One of the other things that really jumps out at me is, as you mentioned, both the Move Ahead Washington and the work that you've done so far, you are really doubling down on preservation. You're really doubling down on repair and making good use of the investments that have already been made. That's a challenging thing to do when countering a desire to invest in new and shiny. So how do you persuasively sort of make that case? I mean, obviously you talked about we've invested $200 billion already. We're not adequately maintaining that. What are some other tips that you would offer to those of us who are tuning in now in order to really encourage our local and state leaders to think about the importance of preservation, particularly when confronted with that pressure to invest and expand, as you described?
You need a consistent message and a persistent message. I've been beating that drum for 6.5 years now. And when I first started, I was a solo artist, and I slowly kind of got the orchestra together because legislators, they listen to their constituents. I'm a subject matter expert, but there are two things I do not do as Secretary of Transportation. I don't appropriate money and I don't write law. Now, I advise the people who do, and I give them my best advice. But if the only person they're hearing this from is me, the Chamber of Commerce is there with the congestion issue and the bright, shiny object issue and all the rest of that. So we went out to cities, to counties, to transit agencies, to chambers of commerce, more rubber chicken than you could imagine, presenting this thing and just saying, the state's economy doesn't run on the infrastructure we wish we had. It runs on the infrastructure we have today. And you cannot take it for granted that it's going to be there in the future. Mike Gribner, who manages our Eastern region in Spokane, Washington, did a great presentation based on that. And he said, here are all the new projects in the last transportation project. Yeah, look what they do. Here are all the things ready to fail. If we pull them out of the system, what kind of system do we have? You just have to be on that message constantly, the safety message and the state of good repair message. And then that hierarchy from safety and state of good repair to let's manage what we have more effectively, and then let's add capacity. But when we add capacity, let's add capacity for people, not necessarily for cars.
Well, and to your point too, I think when you are investing those precious new dollars in new capacity, you in a compelling way, made the case that investments in bike infrastructure is going to create more jobs, it's going to create more economic payback for every dollar that is put in. So that must be helpful in that argument as well, yeah?
It is. And that new highway that's in the bill, a big piece of that new highway is for a size, we're replacing the 520, State Route 520 floating bridge corridor across Lake Washington. And the very tail end of it is the work that we're doing. We're adding no highway capacity to that. We are adding busway and HOV capacity to it. We are adding biking and walking capacity to it. We are connecting the communities on either side of that corridor, but it's classified, as new highway investment. Another new highway investment, $1 billion or more, is the express toll lanes on Interstate 405 that are the infrastructure foundation for Sound Transit's new bus rapid transit system. So, you can make active and public transportation investments work in the context of new highway work, in the context of preservation work, and standing alone.
I know we have to wrap it. I have one more question because I think it's going to be, I think this is what a lot of folks are struggling with, which is DOTs that tend to be a little bit more reactive than proactive. You've clearly laid out a very proactive vision for where your state is headed. We have one participant here who's made note of her or his DOT in which the engineer is waiting until someone dies on the road or the intersection in order to do anything about it. How do you combat that kind of decision making? How can we get, kind of break through the reactive mindset of many DOTs?
Well, the DOTs are a tool of government to implement the policy. When I was a city planning director, somebody told me one time, if you want to see where a city's values are, don't look at their comprehensive plan, look at their budget document, right? And back to my previous statement, I don't write the budget for the DOT. And I don't write the law that gives the DOT policy direction. The legislature does. Engineers and DOTs are problem solvers. The problems they've been given to solve by the people who make these decisions are 20th century problems. We're 22 years into the 21st century. So at AASHTO, the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, I'm the vice president there, and with luck, I'll be president next year. We're talking about all the stuff that I just went through. That's not unique to Washington State, and it's not unique to me. But again, I'm not the boss here. I'm the head of an agency that implements, and so all of you as advocates, all of you as people in agencies, the people you need to be talking to, certainly talking to the engineers at the DOTs, but talk to the people who give them direction, because those are the people changing the world.
Secretary Millar, thank you so much. We appreciate your wisdom. We appreciate your work and your leadership. And thank you so much for spending time with us today. With this, I'll turn it back to Bill Nesper.
Oh, happy to do it.
Yeah, thanks so much, Secretary. And big thanks to Danielle Arigoni for excellent moderation of that session. Yeah, lots of praise, as Danielle said in the chat, and such an inspiration to see leaders like Mayor Scott and Secretary Millar. I know that we're going to be bringing these examples back to our mayors and secretaries, and looking really closely at those budgets, for the values. Yeah, but we'll definitely be pointing to you. So this concludes this opening plenary. I just want to say thanks again for keeping the conversations going in Hoover. Got a lot of questions and conversations going. Let's keep those happening, and posting ideas of things that have worked in your area, areas on some of these issues that we've discussed today. And after this, you're going to go on and enjoy some online breakout sessions starting at 2:30 Eastern time. We have 2 sets of those sessions, and then you'll be back here at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific for an evening plenary, or the afternoon plenary for some of you, with Bogota Mayor Claudia Lopez and our annual Advocacy and Education Award announcement. So we'll look forward to seeing you there, and have a great rest of your day. And thanks again for being here, and to our speakers on this.